So today we're going to talk about Saif al-Islam Gaddafi. This was a man who was supposed to be the future of Libya, the Western-educated son of a dictator, a guy who promised a brand new start for his country. But his story, it's just this incredibly tangled web of contradictions, and it really mirrors the violent, chaotic history of Libya itself. And then, boom, February 3rd, 2026, that whole story comes to a violent, abrupt end. His assassination isn't just some historical footnote. It's a really stark reminder that this conflict is still simmering. His death leaves behind a power vacuum and, honestly, 1,000 unanswered questions about what's next for Libya.
So, how did it come to this? How did the man once seen as the heir to Libya's throne meet such a brutal end? Let's dig into the details of what actually happened. As you can imagine, the news of Gaddafi's death just sent absolute shockwaves through Libya. He was only 53, gunned down in his own home in Zintan, a city that had been both his prison and his refuge. His own political team confirmed it, an attack by 4 masked men. And right away, the government called for an investigation. That's a huge sign of just how much instability his death could unleash.
Okay, so to really get why his death is such a big deal, we have to understand the man himself. And that means trying to wrap our heads around the two completely different people he seemed to be. This is the big question, right? The one that followed him his whole life. Was he the polished, Western-educated reformer? A voice of reason inside a brutal regime? Or was he just a more sophisticated version of his dad? A tyrant, but in a tailored suit? I mean, just look at this. It's like night and day. On one hand, you've got the guy with a PhD from the London School of Economics, the diplomat who helped Libya clean up its image on the world stage. But on the other hand, you have the man wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, the one who threatened rivers of blood to crush the 2011 uprising. How can one person be both of these things?
And this quote says it all. This was his moment of truth. When the Arab Spring finally came to Libya, he had a choice. He could have sided with the reformers, with the ideals he used to talk about, but he didn't. He chose family, he chose his tribe, and he chose the brutal legacy of his father.
And that choice, well, it had immediate and really dramatic consequences. His fall from grace was unbelievably fast and brutal. A journey that took him from the very top, the corridors of power, straight down to a desert prison cell. The timeline of his downfall is just staggering. In February 2011, he was threatening civil war on TV. By October, his father was dead. Just a month after that, Saif himself gets captured, disguised, trying to flee the country. He's sentenced to death in 2015, only to be let out in a really murky amnesty deal in 2017. A whole decade of chaos, basically summed up right here. So after he was released, he just vanished from public life. But then, in a move that honestly shocked a lot of people, he popped back up. Not as a fugitive, but as a presidential candidate, trying to pull off this incredibly audacious political comeback. The year was 2021, and for a brief moment, there was this glimmer of hope for Libya. The country was gearing up for its first ever presidential election, a chance to finally, maybe, move past the chaos. And it was right into this super delicate political situation that Saif al-Islam decided to make his grand return. His candidacy was like a bombshell. He was immediately disqualified. He had a war crimes conviction. But when he tried to appeal, militias literally surrounded the courthouse to stop him from even getting inside. The massive controversy just around him running was a key reason the whole election collapsed, plunging Libya right back into political turmoil. In a super rare interview he gave, he used this bizarre analogy for his comeback, like a striptease, he said. It's such a telling quote, right? It shows this weird mix of political calculation and someone who is just profoundly out of touch with the reality of a country he'd been gone from for a decade. So with his assassination, the final chapter of Saif al-Islam's life is written. But what does his story, from reformer to tyrant, from prisoner to presidential hopeful, what does it tell us about the state of Libya today? His life was really a mirror of his country's own struggles. It was the promise of a modern, democratic Libya, clashing with the brutal realities of tribalism, violence, and foreign meddling. He really embodied those contradictions, and in so many ways, his personal failures were a reflection of his country's. Maybe his most lasting legacy is this incredibly accurate warning he gave way back in 2011. He predicted that the fall of his father's regime wouldn't bring democracy, but decades of civil war. Now, 15 years later, with his own death as a grim exclamation point, that prediction feels more spot on than ever. So his assassination marks the end of the Gaddafi dynasty, but it opens a brand new, uncertain chapter for Libya. Does his death remove a major obstacle to peace, or will it just create a power vacuum that fuels even more conflict? That's the question that hangs over Libya today, a country that's still searching for a way out of the shadow of its own past.